If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and also don't forget to click on the notification bell so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network. The Genovese crime family's New Jersey faction is the group of mobsters who control the interests of New Jersey rackets in the Genovese crime family. It has maintained a strong presence in the northern New Jersey area since the Prohibition era. The faction has increased in power over the years and continues to control illegal activities in labor racketeering, loan sharking, extortion, and illegal gambling. The faction has also held a top position within the crime family dating back to the 1930s with underboss Willie Moretti. From the 1990s until his death in 2010, Tino the Greek has been in control of the New Jersey faction. The faction started as a bootlegging crew under the control of Joe the Boss Masiria. During the Prohibition era, the faction was in charge of smuggling large amounts of alcohol into the New York City's speakeasies. At the peak of Prohibition, violence erupted between the two rival New York City mafia families, known as the Castellamarese War. Masiria, the boss of all bosses, battled with Salvatore Maranzano, the boss of the Brooklyn-based Castellamarese clan, for control over all Italian gangs in the United States. Joe Masiria was murdered in April 1931, followed by Maranzano's murder in September, ending the war. Charles Lucky Luciano established the commission, and the Jersey faction continued working for his family. The alliance of Willie Moretti and Abner Zwillman operated in northern New Jersey for the Luciano family. Zwillman was his own boss and controlled a majority of the illegal alcohol in New Jersey. Moretti, the highest-ranking captain for the Luciano crime family's New Jersey faction, dominated illegal gambling in the state with his Jewish associate Abner Zwillman. In early 1937, the Newark family boss Gaspard D'Amico fled the United States after a failed assassination attempt on his life order by Joseph Profassi. The commission decided to divide up his territory among the Luciano Boiardo crew, the Gagliano Jersey crew, the Mangano crime family, the Bonanno family, Profassi family and the Philadelphia North Jersey crew. That same year, Luciano was arrested, leaving Frank Costello as the acting boss of the crime family. Willie Moretti, a cousin to Costello, was promoted to underboss, and Moretti was replaced in Jersey by Newark captain, Ruggiero Boiardo. During the Prohibition era, Boiardo fought with Jewish mobster Abner Longy Zwillman for control of criminal rackets in Newark. Despite this animosity, the two mobsters were brought together in a sit-down orchestrated by Lucky Luciano and made peace with each other. Sometime later, Boiardo was ambushed and seriously wounded with 12 buckshot pellet wounds. At the time, the press suspected Zwillman was responsible, but later, evidence pointed to the members of another rival gang led by the Mazzocchi brothers, whom Ruggiero Boiardo subsequently had a conflict with. By the 1930s, Boiardo became a made man, or full member of the new Luciano crime family established by Lucky Luciano. In his prime, he had a reputation of being a violent mobster who sported a diamond belt buckle that earned him the nickname Diamond Richie. He became part of mob lore when a soldier and his crew was overheard on an illegal FBI bug reminiscing about how he hit an enemy in the head with a hammer. Boiardo was also heavily involved in the diamond trade prior to his increasingly powerful role within the crime family. He had been one of the true celebrities of the Prohibition era in New Jersey. Portrayed by the authorities as the reigning patriarch of organized crime in Jersey until his death. He had risen from an immigrant stonemason to become one of the most powerful and feared members of the state's organized crime power structure. By the early 1950s, Moretti became mentally ill and it was decided that he needed to be killed. It was being alleged that Moretti's mental condition was possibly deteriorating from advanced stage syphilis, plus he was becoming too talkative. An open contract was placed by the mob commission to have him killed. On October 4, 1951, Moretti was lunching with 4 other men at Joe's restaurant in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. The only patrons in the restaurant, the waitress remembered the men joking together in Italian before going into the kitchen. At 11:28 a.m., the restaurant staff heard shots fired and ran into the dining room. Moretti was lying dead on his back on the floor, with bullet wounds to the face and head. The gunman had already fled the restaurant. Vito Genovese would soon attempt to take over the family from Frank Costello, which he believed belonged to him. A key factor was Costello's weakening alliance with Luciano deportation in 1946 and Moretti's murder in 1951. Costello solely depended on Mangano family boss Albert Anastasia as his major supporter. Vito Genovese on the other hand had gained the support of Lucchese family boss Gaetano Lucchese and Mangano family underboss Carlo Gambino. In May 1957, Genovese ordered the assassination of Costello which failed when Costello was only wounded. This attack made Costello aware that Genovese would never stop and as a result he retired, leaving Genovese as the new boss of the family. Under Vito Genovese's leadership, he promoted Gerardo Cattina as the new boss of the New Jersey faction. He was also made underboss of the family. Cattina, an ally of Genovese, depended heavily on trusted New Jersey captains Ruggiero Boiardo and Angelo De Carlo to help run the faction. Cattina attended the Appalachian meeting in 1957 and was one of the mobsters who were indicted after the convention, following the arrest of Vito Genovese in 1959 on a heroin conviction. As Genovese and many others of the Genovese crime family were under indictment, Cattina began working with longtime captains Anthony Strollo, Michel Miranda and Thomas Eboli, as they were unofficially running the Genovese crime family. According to the 1963 Valachi hearings, the upper administration of the Genovese family included acting boss Thomas Eboli, consigliere Michel Miranda, and underboss Jerry Cattina. Throughout the 1960s, Cattina continued to cooperate with the upper administration. In 1970, Cattina was subpoenaed to testify in Newark, but refused to answer any questions and was held in contempt. In March 1970, he was sentenced to 5 years. After his release in 1975, he retired to Florida. Gerardo Cattina died in 2000 of natural causes. He wasn't named in any other indictments for almost 30 years and died in retirement at the age of 98. Anthony Provenzano became one of the most powerful captains in New Jersey, with his connection to Teamsters Union leader Jimmy Hoffa. His reign was also closely tied to J. Edgar Hoover and Joseph Kennedy. He had strong ties to United States President Richard Nixon due to his position as an International Brotherhood of Teamsters vice president who controlled Teamsters Local 560 in Union City, New Jersey. Provenzano was an extremely powerful and influential mobster, having tremendous political power and extraordinary wealth. He was one of the richest and most powerful people in America, with a staggering net worth of over $3 billion in the 1970s. He was the second most powerful labor leader in America, behind Jimmy Hoffa. As the vice president, Provenzano was able to embezzle money from the Union Pension Fund. He also received kickbacks from construction companies to work on sites and use his title as a legitimate source of income. Both Provenzano and Jimmy Hoffa were imprisoned in the mid-1960s for their part in the corruption of the Teamsters Union. Their sentences at the federal prison in Lewisburg overlapped. The two initially were close allies, with Anthony exercising his rank at the prison, demanding the loyalty of prisoners, which made him the major power within the prison. Provenzano provided Hoffa with protection, but their relationship soured after Hoffa was unable to secure a Teamsters loan for a restaurant he wanted to open. The two became mortal enemies, allegedly after Hoffa insulted Provenzano, telling him, "It's because of people like you that I got into trouble in the first place." After their sentences were over, the two allegedly had a violent confrontation during a chance meeting at an airport. According to sources, Hoffa and Provenzano had a fight, and Hoffa broke a bottle over Provenzano's head. Provenzano broke Hoffa's nose and ribs by punching him with his brass knuckles, then Hoffa broke another bottle over Provenzano's head, which made him badly bleed. Provenzano vowed he would retaliate against Hoffa's grandchildren. Hoffa had been pardoned from prison by President Richard Nixon in 1971, allegedly after the payment of a large bribe from the mafia, with the understanding that he could not engage in union activity. Provenzano was also forbidden to engage in union activity for 5 years as part of his parole, though he remained a power inside the union. Hoffa opposed Provenzano's desire to assume his old post after his 5 years was up, while Provenzano was adamantly against Hoffa's intent to be re-elected president of the Teamsters Union. In the contest of wills, while Hoffa had the hearts of many of the union's rank and file members, Provenzano had the enormous power of a mob captain. On July 30, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared around the time of his secret meeting with two mafia members, Anthony Provenzano and Detroit's Anthony Giacalone. Jimmy Hoffa never returned from his meeting and was never seen again. In 1978, Provenzano was convicted of embezzling from the Teamsters Union Pension Fund. He eventually died in prison in 1988. Louis Manna became the leader of the Genovese New Jersey operation and was the family's consigliere by the early 1980s, with the promotion of Vincent Giganti as the boss. Manna was a close and trusted associate of boss Vincent Giganti. He rented an apartment in Greenwich Village to be closer to Giganti's headquarters at the Triangle Social Club. However, his power base was in New Jersey. Louis supervised 4 captains while also serving as consigliere. He ran his personal criminal operations out of an Italian eatery called Casella's in Hoboken, New Jersey. With the March 1980 murder of Angelo Bruno, boss of the Philadelphia crime family, the family's territory in New Jersey suddenly became open. Manna became the man for the Genovese family in discussions with the Gambino crime family on how to divide up the area. Negotiations were going fine up until the murder of Gambino family boss Paul Castellano in late 1985. Manna was displeased over John Gotti's unsanctioned hit of Castellano and his accession as new boss, but he continued discussing the takeover of the Bruno family operations. By 1987, the relationship between the two families had deteriorated. Gotti had sent word to Manna that the Genovese family should take over the Philadelphia Northern Jersey operations and leave more profitable southern operations of Atlantic City and Philadelphia to the Gambinos. Manna was enraged and insulted over the offer and began planning John and Jean Gotti's assassinations. Making matters worse, after the murder of Genovese Jersey captain John DiGilio in May 1988, the Gambino family took over the International Longshoremen's Association. The Gambinos placed Anthony Pimpinella of Brooklyn as the new head of International Longshoremen's Association, allowing them control over the waterfront rackets at the Newark Elizabeth port. Federal agents received information on Manna's plan to have Gotti killed and informed him on the emerging danger while he was eating at a restaurant with fellow mobsters. In 1990, Manna was indicted for racketeering and conspiring to murder John and Jean Gotti. He received a life sentence and is currently imprisoned at the Federal Correctional Institution in Fairton, New Jersey, with a projected release date of February 20, 2056. When Tino Fiumara was released from prison in 1994, he retook control over his crew and the New Jersey faction. Tino began taking over all the most lucrative rackets in New Jersey, including the docks. However, in the year 2000, he was imprisoned for violating his parole. He decided to promote Lawrence Ricci and Michael A. Borelli as co-acting captain to secure his rackets and protect his power. Ricci oversaw the crew's solid waste removal, trucking, and waterfront rackets, while Borelli controlled the illegal gambling, the Teamsters Union, and the construction rackets. Tino was released from prison in 2005 and moved to Long Island, New York. His acting captain Lawrence Ricci was indicted on labor racketeering charges along with two other members of the International Longshoremen's Association. By October of that year, Ricci went missing. It was not until November 31, 2005 when authorities found his body inside the trunk of a car outside a New Jersey restaurant. On March 9, 2007, Mike Coppola was arrested after 11 years on the run as a fugitive. The FBI offered Coppola a deal to become an informant in their case against the Greek. Michael Coppola refused to testify against Tino in the murder trial of Lawrence Ricci and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Tino Fiumara, also known as the Greek, was a major figure in the Genovese crime family. From about the 1970s until his death in 2010, Fiumara had been the leader of the Genovese New Jersey faction in northern New Jersey. As boss of the family's New Jersey interests, he grossed the organization millions due to his low-key approach and feared reputation. Tino was born in Livingston, New Jersey. He later earned the nickname the Greek from operating a crew in a Greek neighborhood of Bergen County, New Jersey. He has allegedly been linked to several ruthless murders. It was said that he shot and killed a childhood friend over a simple dispute, but no evidence of this has been found. On another occasion, Fiumara allegedly choked a mob associate with a string of piano wire for talking down to him. In the 1960s, he established himself in the New Jersey faction of the Genovese crime family as a top earner and nobody to play with. By the mid-1970s, his crew controlled many of the Genovese union and labor rackets on the New Jersey waterfront. They also participated in illegal gambling, loan sharking, extortion and narcotics running. Tino usually did business with Lucchese crime family captain Anthony Axaturo, who was their Jersey faction's boss. Another one of Fiumara's strongest allies in New Jersey was Genovese crime family captain Lawrence Dentico. One of Tino's biggest rivals was Genovese crime family mobster John DiGilio, who was a powerful figure on the Bayonne waterfront. DiGilio was involved in illegal gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering and extortion in the Genovese family. During the 1950s, under family boss Vito Genovese, DiGilio became a made man and began working under Funzi Thierry. In 1979, Fiumara was convicted of labor racketeering and federal extortion in Newark and Manhattan. He was sentenced to 15 years. While in prison, he continued to control the New Jersey crew. Different crew members, such as Genovese crime family soldier Michael Coppola, assisted Fiumara in running the day-to-day operations. Tino gave orders through messengers and underlings who frequently visited him in prison. In 1994, Fiumara was released from prison. He quickly assumed control of the New Jersey faction. His old rival, John DiGilio, was murdered by the Genovese crime family in 1988. DiGilio and 3 other Genovese mobsters were indicted on federal racketeering charges. Defying his family bosses, DiGilio refused to retain a lawyer and instead mounted his own defense at the trial. During the trial, while arguing with the prosecuting attorney, DiGilio suffered a heart attack, but quickly recovered. While making his closing arguments, DiGilio dismissed FBI recordings of him as locker room talk. He then dumped the cassette tapes into a garbage. On April 17, 1988, he was acquitted of racketeering, but the other defendants were convicted. The Genovese hierarchy was furious with DiGilio. They blamed him for the conviction of the other three men. What especially galled the leadership was that Donald Carson, one of the convicted defendants, was then forced to resign his position as secretary-treasurer of Local 1588. A Gambino crime family mobster replaced Carson at the local, effectively eliminating the Genovese family's major source of labor racketeering revenue. Shortly after DiGilio's trial ended, his wife Ellen reported him missing to police. On May 27, 1988, DiGilio's body, with 2 bullet wounds to the head, was discovered floating in a bag on the Hackensack River near Carlstadt, New Jersey. In 1998, Genovese mobster Louis Oricchio confessed to shooting DiGilio while they were riding in a car. Louis Oricchio was released from prison December 10, 2010, after serving his sentence. The previous head of the New Jersey faction, consigliere, Louis Manna, was imprisoned in 1989 for conspiracy to murder Gambino crime family boss John Gotti. Another rival, Lucchese crime family captain Anthony Axaturo, had been demoted by his boss and was in hiding. Tino Fumara was now completely in charge of all of the Genovese interests in New Jersey. By the mid-1990s, Tino Fumara was recognized as a mafia powerhouse in New Jersey. In 1996, Michael Coppola became a fugitive to avoid prosecution for a 1977 murder in New Jersey. Fumara and Coppola continued to communicate throughout the later part of the 1990s, as Coppola still played an active role in the leadership of the Fumara's Jersey crew. Coppola's reputation and close association with Fumara allowed him to continue making money while in hiding. In April 1999, Tino returned to prison on a parole violation. He was caught going to meet with Genovese superiors and associates in New York City. He had been driven to the meetings hiding in car trunks. Tino was to be released in 2002, however in 2003, he received another 8-month parole violation. Fumara had been in contact with Coppola, who was still a fugitive, and failed to report the contact to law enforcement. On November 30, 2005, the body of Genovese crime family acting Captain Lawrence Ricci was found in a car trunk in New Jersey. It was rumored that Fumara approved Ricci's murder because he had refused to plead guilty in an ongoing racketeering trial. In 2009, it was reported that former New Jersey federal prosecutor Christopher Christie was a stepnephew to Fumara's older brother. Christie told The Times that he first learned about Fumara at age 15 from a newspaper article. Christie said he met him once at a family gathering and another time at a Texas prison, long before becoming a federal prosecutor in 2002. On November 3, 2009, Chris Christie was elected governor. As a known associate and supporter of longtime Genovese crime family boss Vincent Gigante, Fumara had played an important role within the Genovese crime family's New Jersey faction for more than 30 years. For 15 years he had been recognized as the head of the New Jersey rackets for the Genovese crime family, and in the last several years he was seen as a future candidate for boss. Up until his death, he was involved in New Jersey rackets and was a power within the family. Fumara died on September 16, 2010 of cancer. The DeCavalcante crime family is an Italian-American organized crime syndicate that controls organized crime activities in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and a lot of surrounding areas in the state. The DeCavalcante crime family is a small branch of the American Mafia, or the organization maintains strong relations with all of the 5 families of New York and a major alliances and relationships with the Philadelphia crime family, Patriarca crime family, Ufalino, Buffalo crime family, Cleveland, Trafficante crime family, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and many others. Its illicit activities include construction, building and cement violations, drug trafficking, extortion, fencing, fraud, illegal gambling, hijacking, labor racketeering, loan sharking, money laundering, murder, and peer thefts. The DeCavalcantes are, in part, the inspiration for the fictional Dimeo crime family of HBO's dramatic series, The Sopranos. Although not recognized as an autonomous crime family until the regime of Sam DeCavalcante, there were several bosses in North Jersey during the Prohibition era, controlling transportation of alcohol and whiskey into New York City. In Newark, New Jersey, there was the Newark family headed by Gaspar D'Amico, the Reina family's Jersey crew controlled by Gaetano Reina, the Masseria family's New Jersey faction, and the Elizabeth family headed by Stefano Badami. In Newark, D'Amico controlled illegal gambling and bootlegging operations throughout the early 1920s. In 1935, Vincenzo Troia, a former associate of Salvador Maranzano, conspired to take over the Newark family, and he was murdered. 2 years later in 1937, D'Amico fled the United States after a failed assassination attempt on his life order by Joe Profasi. The commission decided to divide up his territory among the 5 families and Badami's Elizabeth family. Stefano Steve Badami became the boss Elizabeth Newark family. However, his reign proved to be very disruptive, as members of the Newark and the Elizabeth factions began fighting for total control of New Jersey. As Badami kept controlling the crew up towards the 1950s, he was suddenly murdered in 1955, in what appears to have been another power struggle between the two factions. Badami's underboss and fellow mobster, Phil Amari, stepped up to run the illegal operations. Filippo Phil Amari, a mobster recognized by the United States law enforcement to be heavily involved with labor racketeering, loan sharking, extortion and narcotics activities in Newark and New York City, was now considered the new head of the New Jersey organization. His reign proved to be very short, as there were multiple factions operating underneath who all conspired to take over. While still in charge, he relocated to Sicily and was replaced by Nicholas Nick Delmore, who were underbosses of Elizabeth and Newark to represent the small New Jersey crime family. As Delmore kept running the organization before he became ill in the early 1960s, the rebellious times of New Jersey had finally ended. Nick Delmore later died in 1964, and his nephew Sam DeCavalcante was quickly installed as new boss of the newly official recognized DeCavalcante crime family of North Jersey. The official criminal organization began with Sam DeCavalcante, a diplomatic old-school, classy and calculated Don who resembled, in many ways, the character of Don Corleone in Mario Puzo's The Godfather. He was born in 1913 and was a mobster involved in illegal gambling, murder and racketeering for most of his life. He died of a heart attack at the age of 84. Between 1964, when he rose to power, and 1969, when he was incarcerated, he doubled the number of made men within his family. He owned Kenilworth Heating and Air Conditioning, in Kenilworth, New Jersey, as a legal front and source of taxable income, and for which he gained the nickname Sam the Plumber. Sam DeCavalcante also claimed to be of Italian royal lineage, and another nickname he bore was the Count. He gained much respect because he won a coveted place on the infamous Commission, a governing body for the U.S. Mafia, which included the 5 families of New York and the Chicago outfit of the Midwest. Mob representatives of Miami were also included. DeCavalcante and 54 associates were charged and tried. He pleaded guilty to operating a gambling racket, turning over $20 million a year. At the same time, a state report indicated that he and another mafia family controlled 90% of pornography stores in New York City. DeCavalcante was sentenced to 5 years, and after he was released from prison, he retired to a high-rise condo in Florida and largely stayed out of mafia business, although the Federal Bureau of Investigation believed he was still advising the family into the early 1990s. John Riggi was a New Jersey mobster and member of the DeCavalcante crime family since the 1940s, before the family had acquired its name. He was the leader of the Elizabeth crew when he was a captain. He had been the acting boss during the 1970s and was the official boss since around 1980. Riggi had been a business agent of the International Association of Laborers in New Jersey for years. He was promoted to the position of official boss of the DeCavalcante crime family, a crime family within the commission with close ties to the 5 families of New York and represented at meetings of the commission by the Genovese family. Riggi reaped the enormous benefits of large labor and construction racketeering, loan sharking, illegal gambling and extortion activities, as well as a large legitimate income. He also had the family maintain their old traditions. Riggi established a close friendship with new Gambino crime family boss, John Gotti. It is believed that Riggi was still running the family from jail, despite being a very sick man in his old age. His release date was in late 2012, but he was due to stand trial for ordering the shooting and murder of Staten Island, New York resident Fred Weiss, a former journalist for the Staten Island Advance newspaper and real estate developer in September 1989. The murder was allegedly a favor for John Gotti, who was worried that Weiss was a government informant and that this would put the Gambino and New Jersey families at higher risk. Weiss and 2 mob partners had purchased a vacant property in Staten Island and started illegally dumping large amounts of dangerous medical waste there. When local authorities uncovered the scheme and started investigating Weiss, the 2 mob families became nervous. Gotti, who worried that Weiss might become a government witness in exchange for leniency, requested that the Jersey mob murder Weiss to protect them. On September 11, 1989, Vincent Palermo and Anthony Capo, as well as a crew of 12 other DeCavalcante associates in a convoy of 4 vehicles, drove to the New York condominium of Weiss's girlfriend. As Weiss left the building and climbed into his car, Palermo and Capo got out of their vehicle, approached Weiss and murdered him by shooting him in the face multiple times. Both of them would become made men as a result of this. While in jail, Riggi appointed a ruling panel to take control of the New Jersey crime family until his release, but the acting boss of the panel, Gaetano Vistola, was arrested and jailed as well. John D'Amato then appointed himself acting boss. D'Amato's reign was short, as it soon became clear that he had been recruited by the Gambino crime family and had been conspiring to murder Vistola. Later in 1991, D'Amato came into an argument with his girlfriend, who was also involved with Anthony Rotondo. She told Rotondo that when she and D'Amato were out at clubs during the evenings, D'Amato would be swinging and have sex with other men. Reportedly, Rotondo became quite upset that someone within the family was taking part in acts and shared it with the current administration members Giacomo Amari, the reputed underboss, and Stefano Vitibile, the powerful consigliere, who decided to have D'Amato murdered after informing the incarcerated Riggi. In January 1992, D'Amato was reported missing. His body has never been found, although U.S. law enforcement recovered his car with some of his blood in it. Vincent Palermo, Anthony Capo and Anthony Rotondo would later testify about this murder against their former associates. In 2006, Philip Abramo, Giuseppe Schifaliti and Stefano Vitibile were sentenced to life imprisonment for their involvement in the murder. Riggi had another 8 years added to his sentence. Riggi has a large and reportedly extremely wealthy family. It is known that at least 3 of Riggi's sons, Emmanuel Manny Riggi, John Jr. Riggi, and Vincent Riggi, are made men within the De Cavalcante crime family at the rank of soldier, or possibly even captain. It is also thought that other blood relatives that mostly reside in and around Elizabeth, New Jersey are connected, but whether to the point of made men or merely associates remains unclear. Riggi did time before his death at the Federal Medical Center in Massachusetts on extortion and labor racketeering convictions. He died on August 11, 2015 at the age of 90. During the mid-1990s, Jake Amari and Stefano Vitibile, now the most powerful members of the family, were present in a sit-down with representatives of the Gambino and Colombo crime families in New York City, as the New Jersey crime mob had been recruiting reputed mafia associates, Louis Consalvo and Gregory Rago, who together operated a social club on Mott Street and held criminal interests in New York City. The only problem was that, since these two mobsters were based in New York, their profits and work should have gone to one of the 5 families, in this instance, either the Gambino or the Colombo crime family. Reputed Gambino family captain Nicholas Carrazzo and Colombo family consigliere Vincenzo Alloy were present during the sit-down. The conflict was eventually resolved peacefully when it was ruled that the De Cavalcante crime family could no longer make members outside of New Jersey and South Philadelphia. In 1995, it was reported that Amari was diagnosed with stomach cancer and could no longer run the family as much as he could before. It was around this time that prominent family captains Vincent Palermo, Girolamo Palermo, who was no relation to Vincent, and Charles Maggiore were promoted into the family ruling panel as street bosses in aid to Amari, who slowly began to die. Jake Amari, the most powerful member of the New Jersey crime family at the time, died of stomach cancer in 1997. After Amari's sudden death, there were 3 faction leaders who were eager to gain control of the New Jersey crime family, as a massive power vacuum was developing. 2 attempts on the lives of both Vinnie Ocean and Charles Maggiore were conspired and hatched by each other, but none of the assassination plots succeeded. The ruling panel kept controlling the family throughout the 1990s. Charles Maggiore was furious that he wasn't appointed acting boss. Maggiore decided to murder the 2 Palermos and take effective control of the De Cavalcante family. He asked Jimmy Gallo to murder Vincent Palermo, better known as Vinnie Ocean, but Gallo instead told Vinnie about the plot. To protect himself, Vinnie decided to murder Maggiore instead. Over the years, Frank Maggiore had made many enemies by removing fellow mobsters from a union he controlled and taking their money. Vinnie Ocean was able to recruit De Cavalcante members Joseph Masella, Anthony Capo, and James Gallo to find Maggiore and murder him. However, on the one occasion when they were ready, they became nervous and decided not to do it. When they reported their failure back to Vinnie Ocean, he decided that Maggiore didn't pose a threat after all and cancelled the murder contract. In 1998, the FBI recruited a mob informant who devastated the Jersey faction. This informant was De Cavalcante associate Ralph Guarino, who had been arrested for robbing Bank of America inside the World Trade Center, and they stole $1.6 million of cash. Unknowingly, that most of the bags stolen was full of European currency, but left bags of American currency. To avoid 20 years in prison, Guarino agreed to work undercover for the FBI. He soon started giving them valuable information on the family's actions and movements. The agency gave him cell phones rigged with surveillance equipment to distribute to other family members. In October of '98, Vincent's trusted lieutenant, Joseph Masella, was shot to death, leaving an opening in the family. Due to secret assistance from the FBI, Guarino's status had been rising in the family. After Macella's murder, Vinnie Ocean and the rest of the DeCavalcante leadership promoted Guarino to a made man. In 1999, the FBI finally moved in on the New Jersey crime family. Vincent had recently proposed to murder mobster Frank D'Amato, and Guarino successfully recorded the conversation. On December 2, the FBI arrested Vinnie and over 24 other members of the family. Palermo was charged with the attempted murders of Frank D'Amato and Frank Maggiore, plus a list of other charges. Hitman Anthony Capo also implicated Palermo in the 1989 Weiss killing. Facing serious charges and possible capital offenses, Vinnie decided to become a government witness. He confessed to killing Weiss and mobster Louis Larasso and to planning the murders of John D'Amato, Joseph Macella, Charles Maggiore, Frank D'Amato and Tom Salvata, who was the manager at his strip club. Palermo also implicated other DeCavalcante family members in various crimes. After testifying for the government, Vincent Palermo and his family entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. However, prosecutors later discovered that Vincent allegedly gave his son, Michael Palermo, $1 million in cash, possibly jeopardizing his status as a protected witness. On September 14, 2009, the New York Daily News exposed Vinnie Ocean's new life in witness protection as a strip club operator in Houston, Texas. He had grown a Van Dyke beard, and the paper ran photos of him. He has been living under a new name. Palermo's new strip clubs are called the Penthouse Club and the All Stars Men's Club. The Houston police allege that they are a source of drug dealing and prostitution in the Houston area. But this has not been proven. Palermo claims that many of his Houston friends already know who he is because he was featured in a television special involving the New Jersey Mafia. He lives in a multi-million-dollar gated mansion. Palermo's son, Vincent Jr., is said to be involved in the day-to-day running of the strip clubs. Just 40 days later, Palermo put his Houston mansion up for sale, first for $4 million. He originally bought the mansion for $900,000 in the early part of the decade. Later that year, Palermo was sued by the Penthouse Club's former owner, claiming he had only paid $5,000 of the $1.3 million selling price. This has also not been proven. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City in 1960, George Zappola joined the Lucchese family working for the Brooklyn faction in the mid-80s. He became one of Anthony Casso's closest allies, and in 1990 he was promoted to captain. Both his father and uncle were small-time associates of the mob and were murdered by unknown gunmen in homicides that were never solved. Despite this, George still wanted to become a made man in the mafia. A Brooklyn faction leader, Zappola joined the labor and construction racketeering operation that earned the most money for the family. This operation was run by Stephen Cree of the Bronx faction. He helped Anthony oversee his various business enterprises. A bagel factory that supplied local McDonald's restaurants. He also worked the numbers rackets and slot machines. He enjoyed watching Major League Baseball games and fights in bars around Brooklyn. He was a regular patron of Bruno's Hair Salon in Bensonhurst, where he would get a massage and pedicure from time to time. He was fastidious about his appearance and obsessed about his weight, walking 6 miles every day to stay trim. He wore a gold watch that was a gift from Casso, inscribed, "To George, a true friend," from Anthony. George was careless about police surveillance and electronic counter-surveillance and carried a cell phone to which only Casso had the number. He was Casso's most trusted killer. In 1987, George Zappola participated in the ambush murder of Lucchese captain Michael Papadio. Michael was a rich captain of the Lucchese family, earning an estimated $1 million a year from his garment racketeering business. He owned a large house in Queens worth $2 million, an apartment at 35 Park Avenue in Manhattan, a condo in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a house in the Hamptons, and drove a Mercedes S-Class. Michael had been a made man in the Lucchese crime family for many years, getting his stripes sometime between 1974 and 1977. He was a member of the Harlem Bronx faction of the Lucchese crime family, based in the northern areas of New York City. He was promoted to captain after the murder of his older brother Andimo, who was murdered outside his home in Lido Beach, Long Island on September 25, 1976. Michael had been in place for many years, taking over the position on the death of his brother, and as such, was one of the most powerful crime figures in the area. Not only was he a huge earner, but he also operated a very lucrative loan sharking business in the streets, one that grossed millions of dollars each year. He was allegedly hiding the money gained from over 50 businesses away from the family for his own benefit. He had earned $15 million that bosses was unaware of. He was called to a meeting with bosses Vittorio Amuso and Anthony Casso in Manhattan to explain his side of the story. In a violent and heated confrontation, Amuso demoted Michael from his job in the garment industry, demanding he handed over all record books he was maintaining that involved details on the companies and unions that the family controlled. The meeting ended with Michael refusing to hand over his business. He told Amuso and Casso that they have brought nothing but destruction and division amongst the family for being too greedy, then walked out of the meeting, vowing to stay on the job, ignoring Amuso's demands. The boss warned him that if he persisted, he would issue instructions to have him killed. But like a man with a death wish, Michael Papadio kept walking out and continued to involve himself in the day-to-day running of the family's garment district affairs. In the months after the meeting, Captain Alphonse D'Arco met with Michael Papadio several times to try and convince him to hand over his businesses, saying that Amuso would spare his life if he obeyed the orders. But Mikey was too stubborn to give up his businesses. He constantly asked what for, and he wanted proof that he was stealing money. On the day of his murder, Papadio and his wife Frances left their home in Queens at 8:30 in the morning. They stopped at the diner where he told her he was going for a coffee before heading next door to pick up some fruit and vegetables. They agreed to meet in an hour. She drove off to do her own shopping. She returned about 10 a.m., but Michael was not waiting for her. He had met up with Captain Salvador Avellino and his son Carmine at the diner, and they both went to a bakery in Queens owned by Avellino. When Michael and the Avellinos arrived at the bakery, they went inside. Alphonse D'Arco and George Zappola waited to carry out the killing. D'Arco was carrying a copper wire cable wrapped in blue insulation tape. Zappola was holding a .22 revolver. As Carmine Avellino led Michael through the bakery towards the rear office area, D'Arco sprang out from behind a pillar and started bashing Michael around the head with a makeshift weapon. To everyone's surprise, the man remained standing, blood streaming from his face. He screamed out, "Why are you hitting me?" Zappola stepped up, produced a revolver and shot Michael. The bullet actually ricocheted off his head, striking a door frame, and amazingly Michael remained standing, holding his face between his hands. Zappola then pulled out a snub-nosed .38 caliber revolver and shot Michael again in the head. Unbelievably, he still remained on his feet, his legs, now spread wide, to support his dying body. Salvador Avellino, Alphonse D'Arco and George Zappola stood around attacking him until he fell to his knees and collapsed onto the floor dead. In February 1990, Zappola traveled to Los Angeles, California to supervise a hit on fellow Lucchese soldier Anthony Delapi, which was carried out by Alphonse D'Arco's son, Little Joe D'Arco. On the night in question, D'Arco and Zappola were dressed in hooded sweatshirts. Little Joe had a .380 Beretta and a .357 Magnum. Zappola remained hidden, supervising Little Joe and ensuring that Delapi was actually murdered. Delapi walked into a parking garage carrying a garment bag. Little Joe stepped out of the shadows and shot him. As Delapi collapsed, D'Arco walked over to Delapi and delivered firing a shot directly into his head. In May 1990, Zappola and George Conte shot James D. Bishop, a Democratic district leader and former head of the Painters Union in Whitestone, Queens, as he was parking his car. The Lucchese family had controlled and looted the District Council 9 of the International Brotherhood of Painters and Allied Trades for years. The mobsters would receive kickbacks from contractors in exchange for bid rigging and allowing the use of cheaper non-union workers. When it appeared that Bishop might cooperate with prosecutors in a state investigation of the district council, the Lucchese family ordered Zappola and Conte to murder him. The early 1990s turned into a disaster for the Lucchese family. In 1991, Vittorio Amuso was convicted on murder charges and sentenced to life in prison. With Amuso in prison, Casso assumed the family leadership and became the new boss. However, Casso was soon indicted himself on murder and racketeering charges and fled the state. During this period, Cree was elevated to underboss, acting on direct orders from the absent Amuso and Casso. In 1993, Casso was finally captured in New Jersey. George Zappola and Captains Frank Papagni and Frank Gioia Jr. saw an opportunity to wrest power away from underboss Stephen Cree. With his ascension to power, Cree had shifted the family's base of power away from Brooklyn. The power bases for Zappola, Papagni and Gioia were in Manhattan and the Bronx, the historic power base of the Lucchese family. Zappola, Papagni, Gioia, and consigliere Frank Lastarino started planning to murder Cree. The disaffected mobsters also conspired with Anthony Casso to kill then-acting boss of the Gambino crime family, John Jr. Gotti, in retaliation for the killing of Patrick Testa. Allegedly, Zappola and his fellow conspirators also wanted to kill Gotti's rival Nicholas Carrazzo in an attempt to split up the Gambino family by causing an internal civil war. Unfortunately for Zappola and the other mobsters, legal problems thwarted all of their plotting. After his 1993 capture, Anthony Casso decided to avoid prison by becoming a government witness. Towards 1994, Zappola was indicted on racketeering and murder charges. As it turned, Casso was dropped from the witness protection program and sent to prison for life. Although Casso never testified, the threat of his testimony convinced Gioia to cooperate with the government for protection. Gioia's testimony would lead to massive indictments of racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, bribery, money laundering, fraud, conspiracy and murder charges. As winter of 1993 through 1994 set in and Casso's March trial date neared, he had grown more desperate. After 2 previously failed breakout attempts, Casso dreamt up the idea of ambushing the bus that transported prisoners from the MCC in Lower Manhattan to the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse. Casso instructed Zappola to surveil the area. Recently promoted to captain, Zappola had hidden out in California and Florida for a time before returning to New York City to assist Casso and oversee his various business enterprises, and was therefore entrusted with coordinating his breakout. After studying the path the bus followed, Zappola decided the optimal place for an assault was opposite the Jehovah's Witness Watchtower building, a few blocks from Brooklyn's federal courthouse. The area was mostly industrial, with a warren of streets linked to a series of local avenues and express ramps. Multiple escape routes were available. Casso's crew on the outside would overtake the bus, cut the locks on its doors, and shoot their way in to free Casso, paramilitary style. The plan for the assault on the bus caused divisions among the Lucchese's incarcerated. Casso was determined to go, and so was Frank Lastarino. But Sal Avellino, an otherwise guy facing RICO charges, was going to stay on the bus when the others ran, as was Michael DeSantis. The plan presented enormous difficulties. First, the plotters had to be sure Casso was actually on the bus on the day they struck, a difficult thing to accomplish due to tightly restricted communications with prisoners. An acting Lucchese captain visited Casso in prison often. In preparation for the escape, Casso and his captain surreptitiously swapped running shoes during one visit. The shoes worn by prisoners were standard-issue rubber-soled laceless sneakers. There were 2 electronic signal devices hidden in the soles of the pair Casso kept. The crew on the outside would be able to detect the signal and know that Casso was on the bus when they hit it. Planning continued into the new year as Casso's collaborators monitored his hearing dates. Finally, their chance came. Early in 1994, on a cold winter day, Casso was in court by dawn. At 10 in the morning the captains took up position at the corner of Cadman Plaza and Tillery Street, outside the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse, waiting for the prisoner bus to emerge from the gated Sally Port. As soon as he received the signal from Casso's sneaker, the captain would contact one of the crew by radio. The attack would begin. But hours passed and the bus failed to emerge from the courthouse. The captain remained on his watch until 2:30 in the afternoon when he abandoned his post due to the cold. He hadn't received Casso's signal. The bus was delayed that day due to the extreme weather. Casso didn't return to the prison until 5:30. In January 1995, George Zappola was indicted on federal charges linking him to 4 killings and conspiracies to kill other members of the Lucchese family. In January of '96, he was indicted in a murder and racketeering indictment. In June 1996, Zappola pleaded guilty to several murders, including the 1990 bishop slaying. Zappola was eventually sentenced to 22 years in prison. If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and also don't forget to click on the notification bell so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network.